The scent of vanilla buttercream and shattered dreams clung to Amelia's Chanel gown. One moment, she was the radiant 6 months pregnant wife of tech millionaire Brandon Locke, celebrating his birthday in a room full of San Francisco's elite. The next, a slice of his custom-made cake was sliding down her face, a cold, sticky testament to his rage. The flash of a dozen iPhones seared the image into the digital ether. The humiliated wife, the furious husband, and a forgotten credit card. They thought they were witnessing the end of a fairy tale. They had no idea they were watching the birth of a queen. The restaurant, Aperture, was less a place to eat and more a testament to Brandon's power. Perched atop a skyscraper overlooking the glittering expanse of the San Francisco Bay, its minimalist decor screamed wealth. Each table was an island, bathed in a soft, intimate spotlight, ensuring privacy for the city's titans of industry. Amelia felt the familiar, gentle pressure of Brandon's hand on the small of her back as he guided her through the hushed room. "Darling, you look breathtaking," he murmured, his voice a low thrum that always made her feel both cherished and owned. He had chosen her dress, a pale blue silk sheath that hugged the graceful swell of her pregnancy. He said it matched her eyes. Amelia knew it was because it made her look demure, the perfect accessory to his sharp, custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. She smiled, a practiced gentle curve of her lips. "Happy birthday, my love!" Their table was the best in the house, a corner booth with a panoramic view of the Golden Gate Bridge, its lights piercing the encroaching fog. Seated already were Patrick Doyle, Brandon's COO and closest confidant, and his wife, Laura. Further down were the potential investors Brandon was courting, the formidable Langston family, patriarchs of an old money conglomerate from the East Coast. They were conservative, traditional, and precisely the kind of partners Brandon needed to legitimize his new, family-focused tech venture. "Amelia, radiant as ever," Patrick said, standing to kiss her cheek. Laura offered a polite, air-thin smile. The dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance. Brandon was the star, charming, brilliant, effusive. He spoke of market caps and disruptive technologies, but he wove in anecdotes about preparing the nursery, about his excitement to become a father. He would periodically reach across the table to squeeze Amelia's hand, a public display of affection that felt more like a reminder of her role. She was the Madonna in his carefully crafted nativity scene, proof of his stability, his legacy. Amelia played her part flawlessly. She laughed at the appropriate moments, asked Edward Langston about his grandchildren, and deflected questions about her own career and art history with a self-deprecating wave of her hand. "Oh, that was a lifetime ago. My focus is entirely on our little one now." The words felt like ash in her mouth. Brandon had insisted she retire from her position at the local museum when they married. "A lock doesn't work," he'd said. "They preside." The tension, invisible to everyone else, was a taut wire between them. Earlier that week, she had brought up a prenatal yoga class she wanted to join. Brandon had dismissed it. "I've hired the best private instructor. You don't need to be in a public class with everyone." He controlled her diet, her social schedule, even the temperature of their penthouse. He called it caring for her. She was beginning to understand it was curation. Dessert arrived, a magnificent multi-layered cake with intricate vanilla bean frosting, a miniature sugar sculpture of the Locke Enterprises logo on top. The room applauded as Brandon blew out a single, elegant candle. He was 35, on top of the world. The waiter, a young man with nervous eyes, presented the bill in a leather folio. It was customary for Patrick to handle these things, a silent understanding within their circle. But tonight, Patrick was deep in conversation with the Langstons. Brandon, basking in the glow of his own success, gestured grandly towards Amelia. "My beautiful wife will handle it," he announced, his voice booming with false magnanimity. "She manages the household finances with such grace." A small, cold knot formed in Amelia's stomach. He had never, not once, asked her to pay for a business dinner. Her allowance, a generous sum that he deposited into her account monthly, was for personal shopping, lunches with friends, charity donations, the acceptable hobbies of a millionaire's wife. This was a test, a power play in front of his audience. She opened her clutch, her heart thumping against her ribs. She pulled out her wallet, the smooth leather feeling slick in her suddenly clammy hands. She knew, with a sickening certainty, what she would find, or rather, what she wouldn't. the sleek black Centurion card Brandon had given her. It wasn't there. She remembered taking it out to pay for a baby gift earlier that day and leaving it on the marble countertop in their dressing room. Her blood ran cold. "Brandon," she whispered, leaning towards him, her voice barely audible. "My card. I think I left it at home." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes, the warm hazel eyes she had fallen in love with, turned to chips of ice. The shift was terrifyingly swift. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl that only she could hear. "I'm so sorry, I must have forgotten it. Can't you or Patrick? Are you incompetent?" The words were a dagger. "I ask you to do one simple thing, one thing, in front of the Langstons." The air crackled. The happy chatter at the table died down as they sensed the shift in atmosphere. Edward Langston cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "It's fine, Brandon," Patrick said quickly, reaching for his own wallet. "I've got it." But Brandon wasn't looking at Patrick. His gaze was locked on Amelia, a venomous, humiliating stare. He felt his authority challenged, his perfect image cracked by her simple, human mistake. He saw the pity in the Langstons' eyes. He saw his multi-billion-dollar deal jeopardized by a forgotten piece of plastic. "No," Brandon said, his voice suddenly loud and clear. He stood up. He picked up the silver cake server, dug it into the remnants of his birthday cake, and scooped up a large, messy wedge of vanilla and buttercream. Time seemed to slow down. Amelia saw the investors' shocked faces, Laura's hand flying to her mouth, Patrick's look of horror. She saw the rage contorting her husband's handsome features into something ugly and unrecognizable. And then he lunged. He didn't just throw it, he smeared it. With a vicious, deliberate motion, Brandon Locke pressed the cake into his pregnant wife's face, grinding it into her hair, her neck, the front of her expensive silk dress. The room fell into a dead, horrified silence, punctuated only by Amelia's sharp, involuntary gasp. The cold, sticky sweetness filled her nostrils. Icing dripped from her eyelashes, blurring her vision. For a moment, she was paralyzed, the sheer public humiliation, a physical blow. A single silent tear traced a clean path through the sugary mask on her cheek. The flash of a phone camera went off, a stark, brutal sound in the silence. The fairy tale had just ended. The silence in the back of the Rolls-Royce Phantom was a living entity, thick, suffocating, and colder than the San Francisco fog swirling outside the tinted windows. Amelia sat rigidly on her side of the plush leather seat, the reek of vanilla and sugar a cloying insult. Shards of dried frosting were matted in her hair, and a large, greasy stain marred the pale blue silk of her dress. She hadn't bothered to wipe all of it away in the restaurant's bathroom. She wanted him to see it. She wanted the stain to scream at him for the entire ride home. Brandon stared straight ahead, his jaw a hard line of granite, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on his knees. He hadn't spoken a word since Patrick had hastily settled the bill, and they'd been ushered out a back exit, away from the prying eyes and whispered gossip that had erupted in the wake of his monstrous act. The investors had left without a word, their disapproval a palpable wave. Amelia's mind was a maelstrom of shock and shame. The image of their faces, of Edward Langston's disgusted grimace and his wife's horrified pity, was burned into her memory. But beneath the humiliation, a different emotion was beginning to crystallize, a cold, hard rage. It started as a tremor in her hands and was slowly spreading through her, burning away the fog of disbelief. This wasn't just about a forgotten credit card. This was about the yoga class. It was about her retired career. It was about the friends he'd subtly pushed away, the opinions he'd systematically dismissed. It was about every small act of control that had seemed like love, every restriction that had been framed as protection. The cake wasn't the start of the problem. It was merely the ugliest, most public symptom of a disease that had been rotting their marriage from the inside out. She had been a project for him. Amelia Cross, the bright, slightly naive art historian from a middle-class family in Sacramento. He had plucked her from her life, polished her, dressed her in designer clothes, and placed her in his penthouse, a beautiful object to complete his collection. And tonight, the object had proven defective. Finally, as the car swept across the Bay Bridge, its lights a blur of indifferent gold, Brandon spoke. His voice was low and devoid of emotion, as if he were discussing a failed quarterly report. "You embarrassed me, Amelia." Her head snapped toward him, The sheer audacity of his words stole her breath. "I embarrassed you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. "You had one responsibility, one, to sit there, look beautiful, and not cause a problem, and you failed, in front of the most important business partners of my career. I made a mistake, Brandon, a simple, human mistake. I forgot a card. You assaulted me." The word felt foreign, and yet perfectly right. He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes held no remorse, only icy annoyance. "Don't be so dramatic. It was a piece of cake, a bit of theatrics to show my displeasure. You made me look weak. You made me look like my house isn't in order. The Langstons value strength, control. You made us a laughingstock." Her house isn't in order. The phrase echoed in the silent car. That's all she was to him. A part of his house, an asset to be managed. The baby, their son, was just another subsidiary of Locke Enterprises. The rage inside her solidified into something sharp and clear. The fear was gone. The shame was gone. In its place was a terrifying, exhilarating clarity. She saw him not as her husband, not as the man who had once wooed her with trips to Paris and whispered promises of forever, but as a stranger. A cold, calculating tyrant whose kingdom was built on image and whose heart was a barren vault. She said nothing else. There were no words. Arguing with him would be like reasoning with a storm. He would twist her words, gaslight her into believing his reaction was somehow her fault. She had played that game before, over smaller things, and always lost. Not tonight. When the Phantom pulled into the private subterranean garage of their penthouse building, Amelia didn't wait for the chauffeur to open her door. She got out, her stained dress a banner of her new, terrible freedom, and walked toward the private elevator without looking back. Upstairs, the penthouse was silent and cavernous. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a city that suddenly felt alien. She had once loved this view, feeling like she was on top of the world with him. Now, she just felt trapped in a glass box. She went straight to their master suite, locking the heavy oak door behind her. She heard him enter the apartment a few moments later, the heavy thud of his footsteps on the marble floor. He tried the handle of the bedroom door. It didn't budge. "Amelia, open the door," he commanded, his voice muffled. "We need to discuss how we're going to handle the PR fallout from this. Not, 'Are you okay?' Not, 'I'm so sorry.'" His first thought was damage control. Amelia ignored him. She stripped off the ruined Chanel gown, balling it up and throwing it into a corner. She stood under the scalding water of the shower for a long time, scrubbing her skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the feeling of his hands on her, the memory of the cloying sweetness of the cake, the stench of her own humiliation. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, she looked at her reflection in the steam-fogged mirror. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Her face was pale but set with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the gentle flutter of her son inside her. It was a small, insistent reminder of who she was fighting for now. Not just herself. Brandon's voice came again, impatient now. "Amelia, stop being childish." She walked past the door, ignoring him completely. She picked up her phone from the nightstand. Her hands were shaking, but her fingers were steady as she scrolled through her contacts. There was only one person she could call. One person who had seen through Brandon's polished veneer from the very beginning. She found the name and pressed the call button. It rang twice before a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered. "Harper, it's me," Amelia said, her voice cracking for the first time that night. "I need your help. Something terrible has happened." Harper Quinn's law office in the Mission District was a world away from Amelia's sterile penthouse. It was a chaotic, vibrant space filled with overflowing bookshelves, stacks of legal briefs, and the faint scent of strong coffee and old paper. Harper herself was the eye of this hurricane, sharp, impeccably dressed in a tailored blazer and jeans, with an intelligence that snapped and crackled in the air around her. She had been Amelia's best friend since college, their bond forged over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza, long before Brandon Locke entered the picture. Amelia sat on a worn leather couch, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. She had recounted the entire story, her voice low and steady, refusing to cry. Crying felt like a concession, a weakness she could no longer afford. Harper listened without interruption, her expression hardening from concern to a steely, controlled fury. When Amelia finished, Harper leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. Okay, she said, her voice crisp and professional. First things first. You and the baby are my priority. Are you hurt? Did he touch you anywhere else? No, just the cake. Physically, I'm fine. Amelia took a shaky breath. Emotionally, I feel like I just woke up from a coma. Good, Harper said, a surprising response that made Amelia look up. Waking up is what we need. The Amelia I know, the one who could deconstruct a 15th century triptych and argue its provenance for an hour, has been asleep for too long. Welcome back? A flicker of the old Amelia, the passionate, intelligent woman she used to be, stirred within her. Harper was right. Brandon had slowly, methodically sanded down her edges until she was smooth, polished, and perfectly compliant. He called it theatrics, Harper. He's not sorry. He's just angry that his image is tarnished. Of course he is, Harper scoffed, pacing in front of her desk. Men like Brandon Locke don't have emotions. They have assets and liabilities. His perfect family is an asset. Your public humiliation is a liability. His entire apology tour, which I guarantee is coming, will be about mitigating his losses, not healing your pain. Harper stopped pacing and fixed Amelia with a serious look. So, the question is, what do you want to do? Do you want to leave him? The question hung in the air, immense and terrifying. Leaving Brandon meant leaving the life of unimaginable luxury and security he provided. It meant a public, messy divorce that would be fodder for gossip columns for months. It meant raising her son alone. But staying? Staying meant suffocating. It meant raising her son in the shadow of a tyrant, teaching him that this was how a man treated a woman. Amelia placed a hand on her belly. I can't bring a child into that house, she said, her voice gaining strength. I can't let my son think that what his father did is acceptable. I want out. A slow, determined smile spread across Harper's face. Good. That's the first step. But we're not going to just walk away. We're not going to be the victims in his narrative. We are going to be the architects of his downfall. Harper's energy was infectious, clearing the last vestiges of Amelia's fear. What do you mean? Think about it, Amelia. Why this dinner? Why the Langstons? Brandon is a tech guy, new money. The Langstons are old-world industrialists. They're like oil and water. Why was he so desperate to impress them that he'd snap over a credit card? He's launching a new venture, Amelia recalled. Something about educational technology, a platform for families. He said their backing would give it legacy legitimacy. Harper's eyes lit up. Family values, legacy, that's our angle. She started typing furiously on her laptop. Men like Langston don't just invest money, they invest in an image. They want their partners to be paragons of virtue. A man who publicly assaults his pregnant wife over a dinner bill is not a paragon of virtue. She pulled up a news feed. It was already there. A blurry photo, clearly taken on a phone, was circulating on a popular gossip blog. The headline read, Tech mogul Brandon Locke's sweet gesture turns sour, an eyewitness account. The story was still vague, but the image was damning. Amelia, head bowed, face covered in cake, Brandon standing over her like a thundercloud. The first stone has been thrown, Harper said, looking at the screen. Now we build an avalanche. Harper's plan was simple, yet brilliant. It wasn't about filing for divorce immediately. That was a predictable move. This was about seizing control. First, we need leverage, Harper explained, her mind working like a high-speed processor. We need to know the specifics of this deal with Langston Global. Is there a morality clause? What are the terms? You're still his wife. You have access. He keeps everything on his personal server. It's encrypted. I don't have the passwords, Amelia said, her hope deflating. You don't need them, Harper countered. He has a home office, right? Physical documents, a personal laptop he sometimes leaves unlocked. Amelia's mind raced. Yes, sometimes, when he takes a call, he walks out and leaves his laptop open on his desk. That's our window. I need you to go back to that penthouse, Amelia. I know it's the last place on earth you want to be, but you need to play the part. Be the penitent wife. Apologize for your mistake. Let him think he's won, that he's put you back in your box. And while he's basking in his own magnanimity, you are going to be a spy in your own home. Find me the details of that deal. The thought of facing Brandon again, of pretending to be meek and sorry, made Amelia's stomach churn. But the thought of walking away with nothing, of letting him paint her as an unstable, emotional woman, was worse. I can do it, she said, the words feeling solid and real. "I'll do it for my son." "That's my girl," Harper said, squeezing her shoulder. "He threw cake at you to humiliate you, to show you that you were nothing. We're going to use that humiliation, that image, and turn it into a weapon he never sees coming. He thinks he's playing chess, but he doesn't realize we're about to flip the entire board." Leaving Harper's office, Amelia felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. The city lights didn't seem so alien anymore. They looked like a challenge. She was no longer just Amelia Cross, art historian. She was no longer just Mrs. Brandon Locke, society wife. She was a woman on a mission, and the war had just begun. Returning to the penthouse was one of the hardest things Amelia had ever done. The elevator's silent ascent felt like a journey into the belly of the beast. With every floor, she rehearsed Harper's instructions, steeling her nerves, pushing down the visceral urge to turn and flee. Be the penitent wife. Let him think he's won. She found Brandon in his home office, a vast room of glass and chrome overlooking the glittering city. He was on the phone, his back to the door, his voice sharp and commanding. He was already in damage control mode. "No, listen to me. PR is handling it. We'll frame it as a playful spat, a misunderstanding, a moment of passion. Yes, I'll speak to him personally." He sensed her presence and turned, his eyes narrowing. He ended the call without a goodbye. The air thickened with unspoken accusations. Amelia didn't wait for him to speak. She took a deep breath and began her performance. She walked towards him, her gaze fixed on the floor, the picture of contrition. "Brandon," she began, her voice a carefully modulated whisper. "I am so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Leaving the card at home, it was careless and stupid. I ruined your birthday. I embarrassed you in front of everyone. There's no excuse." She let a single tear roll down her cheek, a calculated touch of vulnerability. She hated herself for it, but she knew it was what he needed to see. Brandon watched her, his expression unreadable. He was a predator sensing a wounded animal. For a long moment he said nothing, letting her squirm in the silence. Then, a slow, patronizing smile touched his lips. He had won. She was back in her box. "It's done, Amelia," he said, his tone magnanimous now that his dominance was re-established. "It was an ugly scene, but we'll move past it." He walked over to her and tilted her chin up with his finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I may have overreacted. The pressure of the Langston deal is immense, but you need to understand your role. You are a reflection of me. Your mistakes are my mistakes." "I know," she said, forcing herself not to flinch from his touch. "I'll do better, I promise." His apology arrived the next day. A brand new fully electric Porsche Taycan, cherry red, parked in her spot in the garage with a giant bow on it. The card read, "For a fresh start. Love, B." It wasn't an apology, it was a transaction, a payment for her silence and compliance. The days that followed were a tense, surreal ballet. Amelia played the part of the dutiful, adoring wife to perfection. She brought him his coffee in the morning, complimented his business acumen, and listened patiently to his monologues about his own genius. She endured his touch, his casual ownership of her body, and the way he spoke about our son, as if the child were the next major Locke Enterprises acquisition. Inside, she was a coiled spring. Every fake smile, every placating nod, fueled the fire burning in her gut. She was biding her time, waiting for her moment. It came on a Thursday afternoon. Brandon was on a conference call in the main living area, pacing back and forth as he barked orders at his team. His laptop was open on the desk in his office, the screen glowing. Amelia knew this was her chance. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slipped into the office, closing the door almost all the way, leaving just a crack to listen for his approach. The laptop was unlocked. His email was open. She felt a surge of adrenaline. With trembling fingers, she typed Langston Global into the search bar. A chain of emails appeared. Attached to the most recent one was a PDF file labeled Project Legacy, Term Sheet Draft. Her hands shook as she plugged in a tiny flash drive Harper had given her. The drive was disguised as a Cartier pendant on a necklace she wore. It was a piece of spycraft that had seemed overly dramatic in Harper's office, but felt chillingly necessary now. The file was large. The progress bar on the screen seemed to move in slow motion. Each second stretched into an eternity. She could hear Brandon's voice from the other room, his footsteps as he paced. Was he coming closer? Come on, come on. The transfer complete notification popped up. Amelia ripped the necklace from her neck, unplugged the flash drive, and shoved it into her pocket just as she heard Brandon's voice soften, the telltale sign of a call ending. She quickly clicked away from his email, opening a browser to a website for high-end nursery furniture. When he walked in a moment later, she looked up with a bright, innocent smile. "I was just looking at cribs," she said, her voice miraculously steady. "Do you like the oak or the white?" He glanced at the screen, his attention already elsewhere. "The oak, it's more substantial." He barely looked at her, already pulling his phone from his pocket, his mind back on his empire. He hadn't suspected a thing. Amelia excused herself, her legs feeling like jelly. In the safety of their master bathroom, she locked the door and leaned against it, her body trembling with the aftershock of the adrenaline. She had the file. She had the leverage. That night, unable to sleep, she lay in bed next to Brandon's sleeping form. His rhythmic breathing was the only sound in the dark room. He looked so peaceful, so handsome, a stranger. She thought about the man she had married, or the man she thought she had married. Had the kindness all been an act, or had he changed? Or, more terrifyingly, had she simply refused to see the monster that was there all along? She slipped out of bed and went to the large walk-in closet, a room larger than her first apartment. In the back, tucked away in a dusty box, were her old art history textbooks. She pulled one out, the familiar weight of it a comfort in her hands. She flipped through the pages, the images of Renaissance art a balm to her fractured soul. She stopped at a chapter on Artemisia Gentileschi, the 17th century painter who had channeled her own trauma and rage into powerful, visceral paintings of strong women. Looking at Gentileschi's Judith-slaying Holofernes, Amelia felt a profound and startling kinship across the centuries. It was a painting of righteous fury, of a woman taking back her power from her abuser. A quiet resolve settled over her. She was not a victim. She was a strategist. And like Judith, she would be the one to wield the sword. She closed the book, her mission clearer than ever. She wasn't just escaping, she was going to dismantle his kingdom from the inside out. Amelia met Harper at a small, anonymous coffee shop in North Beach the next morning. The air was thick with the scent of roasted espresso beans and fog. Amelia slid the flash drive, now removed from its pendant casing, across the table. "I got it," she said, her voice low. "The term sheet for Project Legacy." Harper's eyes gleamed with triumph. She took the drive, her expression a mixture of pride and fierce protectiveness. "You are incredibly brave, Amelia. Do you know that?" Amelia managed a small smile. "I was terrified, but thinking about what he did, what he is, makes me brave." Harper plugged the drive into a sleek, encrypted tablet. She navigated to the file, and her eyes scanned the dense legalese of the document. For several minutes, the only sounds were the hiss of the espresso machine and Harper's occasional sharp intake of breath. "Oh, this is better than I could have hoped for," Harper murmured, her finger tracing a line on the screen. She turned the tablet so Amelia could see. She pointed to Section 8, subsection C. The heading was Personal Conduct and Morality Clause. Amelia read the paragraph. The language was archaic and steeped in the corporate conservatism, but the meaning was crystal clear. It stated that any principal of the joint venture, namely Brandon Locke, must conduct his personal and public life in a manner consistent with the highest standards of family values, moral character, and ethical repute. It went on to specify that any act of public scandal, moral turpitude, or behavior that brings disrepute upon the venture would be grounds for immediate termination of the agreement by Langston Global, with significant financial penalties for the Locke-led entity. "A morality clause," Amelia breathed. "It's real." "It's an ironclad, fire-breathing dragon of a morality clause," Harper corrected, her excitement palpable. "The Langstons aren't just investing in his tech, they're investing in the myth of Brandon Locke, the perfect family man. This document makes your marriage, your pregnancy, and your public image a material component of the entire multi-billion-dollar deal." The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of breathtaking cynicism. Brandon's sudden insistence on a family brand, his carefully curated Instagram posts of them preparing the nursery, his desperation at the restaurant. It wasn't about love or legacy in the emotional sense. It was about securing this deal. She and their unborn son weren't his family. They were his collateral. The realization hit her not with a fiery rage, but with a profound, hollowing cold. She had been a fool, a willing participant in her own deception. "He never loved me," she said, the words tasting like poison. "He acquired me." "He doesn't know how to love, Amelia," Harper said gently, her professional demeanor softening. "He only knows how to possess. But now, his prized possession is about to become his greatest liability." Harper leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This changes everything. We don't need to fight him on his terms, in a messy divorce court where his army of lawyers will bury us. We can hit him where he is weakest and most vulnerable, his reputation, his wallet." "What do we do?" Amelia asked, her mind spinning. "We wait for the perfect moment," Harper said, her eyes alight with strategic fire. "He thinks the photo from the restaurant is a brush fire he can stamp out with a good PR team and a new Porsche. He has no idea we're holding a nuke. We need a stage, a public forum where he feels completely in control, completely safe, a place where the Langstons will be present." Amelia thought for a moment, her knowledge of Brandon's meticulously planned social calendar kicking in. "The Locke Foundation Gala," she said instantly. "It's in 2 weeks. It's his signature event of the year. He raises money for children's charities. It's the peak of his philanthropic family man persona. The Langstons are the guests of honor this year." Harper's smile was predatory. "Perfect. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. He'll expect you to be on stage with him. The glowing, forgiving, pregnant wife. A living, breathing symbol of his wonderful life. And what will I be instead?" "You," Harper said, "will be the truth." The plan began to form, a daring and terrifying strategy. It would require a performance far more convincing than the one she was currently staging at home. It would require her to stand by his side, smiling for 2 more weeks, all while secretly preparing to detonate his world. As they left the coffee shop and stepped back into the gray San Francisco morning, Amelia felt a shift in her own internal landscape. The victim was gone. The hurt, while still present, was being repurposed. It was no longer a wound. It was fuel. She was not just fighting against Brandon anymore. She was fighting for a future where her son would learn what real strength and integrity looked like, not from the father who had abandoned those principles, but from the mother who had reclaimed them. The path ahead was perilous, but for the first time in a long time, it was her own. 2 days after discovering the morality clause, Amelia received a summons. It came in the form of a curt text message from a number she had saved under Margaret, T. the Fairmont. 3 p.m. "Don't be late. It wasn't a request." Margaret Locke was the architect of Brandon's ambition and the source of his coldness, a woman carved from glacial ice and old money. She saw emotion as a vulgar indulgence and marriage as a strategic merger. Amelia had always been unnerved by her, by the way Margaret's pale blue eyes assessed her with the detached scrutiny of a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. Amelia chose her outfit carefully, a conservative cream-colored cashmere dress, low heels, and minimal makeup. She needed to look serene, unbothered, the very picture of a woman who had forgiven her husband's minor indiscretion. She found her mother-in-law in the Fairmont's Laurel Court, seated at a pristine table set for high tea. Margaret was immaculate in a steel gray suit, her silver hair styled in a severe, elegant chignon. She didn't smile as Amelia approached. "Amelia, you look recovered," Margaret said, her voice as crisp as a winter morning. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "I'm perfectly fine, Margaret. It was just a silly misunderstanding," Amelia replied, her voice smooth as cream. The lie felt practiced, easy now. A waiter poured Earl Grey tea into fine china cups. For a few moments they sat in a silence so thick Amelia could feel it pressing on her. Margaret took a delicate sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving Amelia's face. "The internet seems to think otherwise," Margaret finally said, placing her cup down with a soft click. "There are pictures, unflattering ones, chatter. It's messy. Brandon and I have handled it. He was under a lot of pressure." Margaret waved a dismissive, beer-ringed hand. "Pressure is not an excuse for poor optics. Brandon knows this. I taught him better. What happened at that restaurant was not just an emotional outburst. It was a tactical error." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. Margaret wasn't concerned about her daughter-in-law's well-being or her son's temper. She was critiquing the execution of his cruelty. "The Locke name means something," Margaret continued, her voice low and intense. "It means strength, control, an impenetrable facade. What Brandon did was expose a crack in that facade. He showed the world, and more importantly, the Langstons, a man who cannot manage his own house. There it was again, that phrase, his own house. The Langstons are very important to him, Amelia offered, testing the waters. Margaret's gaze sharpened. The Langstons are not important. Their name, their legacy, their capital, that is what's important. This deal is the culmination of everything I have raised Brandon to be. It will elevate our family from mere tech billionaires to a dynasty. It is everything. Her eyes bored into Amelia. And you, my dear, are a crucial component of the deal's success. She leaned forward, the scent of her expensive floral perfume washing over Amelia. Your little incident has created a problem that must be solved before the Foundation Gala. The Langstons will be there. The world will be watching. There can be no doubt in anyone's mind that the Locke family is the picture of stability and devotion. What are you suggesting? Amelia asked, her teacup rattling faintly in its saucer. I am not suggesting. I am instructing, Margaret said, her voice dropping the last pretense of civility. At the gala, you will be by Brandon's side. You will look at him with nothing but adoration. When he gives his speech, you will weep with pride. You will be the perfect forgiving wife and mother-to-be. You will erase the memory of that unfortunate photograph and replace it with an image of unwavering solidarity. Are we clear? The sheer unadulterated coldness of the command was staggering. Margaret didn't care if Brandon was a monster in private, as long as he played the part of a prince in public. She was the director of this grand play, and Amelia was just an actress with a non-negotiable script. But Amelia was no longer the frightened girl who had first met this formidable woman. She had the term sheet. She had a plan. And she found, to her own surprise, that Margaret's threats no longer intimidated her. They clarified things. Brandon wasn't an anomaly. He was a product, a carefully manufactured monster, created by the woman sitting right in front of her. Amelia met Margaret's icy gaze with a newfound calm. She gave her a slow, beatific smile, the very picture of compliance. Of course, Margaret, she said, her voice like honey. I understand completely. The family's image is paramount. I would never do anything to jeopardize Brandon's deal. You can count on me to play my part perfectly. For the first time, a flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps satisfaction, crossed Margaret's face. She believed she had won. She had put the little middle-class girl back in her place. Good, Margaret said. Leaning back in her chair, the audience concluded. I'm glad we understand each other. As Amelia left the Fairmont and stepped out into the bustling city, she felt a profound sense of pity for the woman she had just left behind. Margaret had spent her entire life building a fortress of wealth and power, but she lived in the coldest, loneliest room. She had traded love for legacy and raised a son who could only value a person by their utility. The encounter had solidified Amelia's resolve. Her actions at the gala would not just be for her and her son. They would be a blow against the entire rotten, gilded cage the Lockes had built around themselves. She wasn't just escaping her husband. She was rejecting their entire poisonous ideology. And the stage for her rebellion was now officially set. The 2 weeks leading up to the Locke Foundation Gala were the most surreal of Amelia's life. On the surface, everything was perfect. Brandon, believing she was fully subdued and back under his control, was magnanimously charming. He showered her with gifts, a diamond necklace to be worn at the gala, a first-edition collection of art history books, a private chef to cater to her pregnancy cravings. Each gift felt less like an act of love and more like a gilded chain, reinforcing her role as his prized possession. Amelia played her part with an Oscar-worthy performance. She was the loving, forgiving wife. She accompanied him to pre-gala luncheons, smiling serenely, her hand placed proprietorially on her stomach, a constant visual reminder of the Locke legacy and progress. She discussed nursery colors with Laura Doyle and allowed Margaret to advise her on the appropriate tone for a society wife's public life. Beneath the placid surface, however, a revolution was brewing. Her evenings were spent in secret. After Brandon fell asleep, she would retreat to her study, the one room in the penthouse that was truly hers. There, on an encrypted laptop provided by Harper, she worked. The first step was securing her independence. Harper had discovered a clause in her prenuptial agreement that Amelia herself had insisted upon, much to Brandon's annoyance at the time. It stipulated that a small but significant trust fund, inherited from her grandparents, would remain solely her property, untouched and unmanaged by Brandon. It was a pittance compared to his fortune, but it was enough. Enough for a new life, a safe home for her and her son. With Harper's help, she arranged to have the funds transferred to a new private account under her maiden name. The second, more audacious step was preparing her speech. She wasn't just going to announce she was leaving him. That would be dramatic, but it wouldn't be enough. She needed to dismantle his narrative and build her own in its place. She spent hours writing and rewriting, honing each word until it was a polished weapon. She didn't want to sound like a hysterical, scorned woman. She needed to be calm, articulate, and powerful. Her voice needed to be one of quiet dignity, not shrieking rage. The power of her message would be in its undeniable, heartbreaking truth. She also began laying the groundwork for her final move. She researched domestic abuse charities, women's shelters, and legal aid societies. She made calls, speaking to directors and founders, learning about their work and their needs. A new idea began to form, a way to turn her pain into a purpose that was bigger than just her own escape. Harper was her co-conspirator, her general. They had daily, clandestine phone calls. "He's booked a table for the board of the Children's Health Initiative right next to the Langstons," Amelia reported one night, whispering into her phone from the cavernous walk-in closet. "He's creating an ecosystem of family values right around them." "Perfect," Harper's voice crackled back. "The more saints he surrounds himself with, the more demonic he'll look when the truth comes out. How are you holding up?" "I feel like a spy in my own life," Amelia admitted. "Every time he touches me, I have to fight the urge to recoil. But then I think about the gala, I think about my son, and I can do it." The night before the event, Brandon stood behind her as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was wearing the dress he'd had custom made for her, a stunning, floor-length gown of emerald green silk that made her look like a goddess of fertility. The diamond necklace he'd bought her glittered at her throat. He wrapped his arms around her, resting his hands on her stomach. She could see his reflection in the mirror, his handsome face smiling, radiating satisfaction. "Look at us," he said, his voice a proud murmur against her hair. "The perfect family. Tomorrow night, the Langstons will see this. They'll see our future, our legacy. After the gala, the deal will be done." He thought he was looking at a masterpiece of his own creation. He had no idea he was looking at his executioner. "It will be a night to remember," Amelia said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. She infused her voice with a double meaning only she could understand. He kissed her shoulder. "Get a good night's sleep. You're the star of the show tomorrow, my love. You and our boy." That night, Amelia didn't sleep at all. She sat by the window, watching the city lights, the speech she had written, committed to memory. She thought about the woman she had been when she first met Brandon, hopeful, a little naive, but full of passion for her work and her life. He hadn't just controlled her. He had tried to extinguish that fire. But the fire wasn't out. He had only banked the embers. And tomorrow night, at the height of his triumph, in a room filled with his most important allies, she was going to use those embers to burn his entire world to the ground. The storm was here, and she was its calm, quiet, devastating center. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a symphony of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, weighing as much as small cars, dripped light onto a sea of San Francisco's most powerful people. The air hummed with polite laughter, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the scent of money and expensive perfume. This was Brandon Locke's court, and tonight he was its undisputed king. Amelia stood by his side in the receiving line, a serene smile plastered on her face. Her emerald gown shimmered under the lights, and she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her swollen belly. She was the living embodiment of Brandon's success, the beautiful vessel for his legacy. Each compliment she received, "You're glowing," "Motherhood suits you," felt like a small cut. When the Langstons arrived, Brandon's charm went into overdrive. He introduced Amelia with a flourish. "And this, of course, is my better half, my inspiration, Amelia." Edward Langston, a stern-faced man with eyes that missed nothing, gave her a polite nod. "A pleasure, Mrs. Locke. I'm glad to see everything is, well." The slight pause was deliberate, a clear reference to the incident at the restaurant. "We've never been better," Amelia replied, her voice as smooth as silk, meeting his gaze without faltering. A strong marriage isn't one without disagreements, but one that grows stronger by overcoming them. She saw a flicker of respect in the old man's eyes. Brandon squeezed her hand, pleased with her perfect scripted response. He had no idea the script she was truly following was her own. The dinner was an interminable affair. Amelia picked at her food, her stomach a knot of nerves and steely resolve. From the stage, a series of speakers lauded Brandon's generosity, his vision, his commitment to family. A slickly produced video played, featuring smiling children from the charities he supported, interspersed with soft-focus shots of him and a radiant Amelia walking on a beach, his hand resting on her stomach. The room audibly awed. The propaganda was breathtakingly effective. Finally, the moment came. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. And now, it is my distinct honor to welcome to the stage the man of the hour, the founder of the Locke Foundation, Mr. Brandon Locke. The room erupted in applause. Brandon stood basking in it and turned to Amelia, holding out his hand. "Come with me, darling." Her heart hammered in her chest, but her face remained a mask of placid adoration. She took his hand and allowed him to lead her onto the brightly lit stage. He guided her to a single, throne-like chair set slightly behind the podium while he stood at the front. The symbolism was not lost on her. He was the speaker. She was the silent, supportive prop. Brandon began his speech, his voice resonating with practiced charisma. He spoke of hope, of the future, of the duty of the privileged to help the less fortunate. He spoke of his own impending fatherhood, his voice thick with emotion. Oh, and as I stand here, on the cusp of becoming a father, I understand more than ever that our true legacy is not in the companies we build, but in the world we leave for our children. He turned to Amelia, his eyes shining with what looked like genuine love. The entire room followed his gaze. And I could not do any of this without my incredible wife, Amelia. Her grace, her strength, and her heart are the foundation of my world. In fact, I'd like her to say a few words. This was it, the moment she had rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times. This was his fatal mistake. Drunk on his own success, he was handing her the microphone, expecting a few tearful, loving sentences to seal his perfect image. She stood slowly, gracefully, and walked to the podium. Brandon beamed, stepping aside to give her the stage. He kissed her cheek, whispering, "Just a few words, my love. Tell them how happy we are." Amelia looked out at the sea of faces. Margaret's smug smile, the Langstons' approving nods, Brandon's triumphant gaze. She took a deep, steadying breath. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and calm, amplified throughout the silent ballroom. "Brandon is right. Our legacy is the world we leave for our children, and it is for my son that I need to speak tonight. Not with the words my husband expects, but with the truth." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Brandon's smile tightened at the edges. "You all see a beautiful story here," Amelia continued, her voice gaining strength. "A story of wealth, power, and the perfect family. But the most beautiful facades often hide the deepest cracks. The story you saw in a video is a fiction. The truth is much darker." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The room was now dead silent. "The truth is that 2 weeks ago, at his birthday dinner, my husband didn't just disagree with me. In a room full of people, he humiliated me. He assaulted me. He smeared cake on my face and in my hair because I made a simple mistake, because his pregnant wife momentarily tarnished his perfect image in front of potential investors." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. All eyes darted from Amelia to Brandon, whose face had turned a sickly shade of pale. Margaret looked as if she'd been slapped. "He didn't apologize for the pain he caused me," Amelia's voice rang out, strong and unwavering. "He apologized for the tactical error. He bought me a new car to purchase my silence, because he is not governed by love, but by a morality clause in a business deal." She looked directly at the Langstons' table. "A deal that requires him to present the image of a perfect family man. This family, this baby, are not the foundation of his world. They are leverage. We are assets." Brandon lunged for the microphone, his face a mask of fury. "Amelia, that's enough!" But she held it fast, sidestepping him. "No, Brandon. For 2 years, I have had enough of the control, the isolation, the quiet gaslighting that you call love. But tonight, it ends." She turned back to the stunned audience. "I am leaving my husband, and I am taking the one thing of value from this marriage that is truly mine, my integrity. and I plan to use it. I have discovered that the trust fund my grandparents left me is more than enough to start a new life. So tonight, I am pledging to use it to launch a new foundation. One that won't just have a gala once a year, but will work every single day to provide resources, legal aid, and safe havens for women and children who are trapped in gilded cages, who suffer abuse behind the closed doors of powerful men. Tears were now streaming down her face, but they were tears of liberation, not sorrow. My son will not be raised in a house where a woman's worth is measured by her compliance. He will be raised in a house where truth matters. That is my legacy. She placed the microphone gently on the podium and, without a single glance at the ruins of the man beside her, she turned and walked off the stage. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum of shock and awe. Then, from the back of the room, one person began to clap, then another, and another. Soon, the entire room, save for the Locks and the Langstons' table, was on its feet, a thunderous rolling ovation washing over her as she walked, head held high, out of the ballroom and into her new life. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Brandon. The video of Amelia's speech, captured on 100 smartphones, went viral before the gala guests had even found their cars. Lock Gala, Gilded Cage, and Amelia Cross were trending worldwide by sunrise. The carefully constructed facade of Brandon Locke, philanthropist and family man, had been publicly and irrevocably demolished. The Langston Global deal didn't just collapse, it evaporated. Edward Langston issued a public statement within 24 hours, citing a failure to meet the ethical and moral standards of their partnership. The stock of Locke Enterprises plummeted. Journalists dug into Brandon's past, and a pattern of control and intimidation in his business dealings began to emerge. The king was not just dethroned, his castle was being dismantled stone by stone. Amelia didn't watch any of it. Guided by Harper, she had disappeared. She'd moved into a beautiful but modest rented house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Berkeley, a world away from the sterile glass box in the sky. Her first purchase was a set of canvases and oil paints. The simple act of mixing colors, of creating something with her own hands, felt like breathing again after years of being underwater. Her new foundation, which she named the Artemisia Project, after the painter who had inspired her, was inundated with support. Donations poured in from anonymous women, from wealthy philanthropists who had been at the gala, from people all over the world who had been moved by her story. Harper left her corporate law firm to become the project's chief legal counsel, and together they began building something real, something that would make a difference. A month after the gala, Amelia received a letter. It was from Brandon. Her first instinct was to burn it, but sensing this was a final chapter she needed to close, she opened it. The letter was not what she expected. It wasn't angry or manipulative. It was short, stilted, and broken. He wrote that his mother, Margaret, no longer spoke to him. His company was in turmoil. He was alone, for the first time in his life, in the silent penthouse. He wrote that the silence was deafening. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only stated in one simple raw sentence, "You were the only real thing in my life, and I destroyed it." Amelia read the letter, and for the first time, felt a flicker of something akin to pity, not enough to reconsider, not enough to forgive, but enough to understand. He was a man so trapped in the prison of his own making that he didn't know how to exist outside of it. His redemption, if it ever came, would be a long, lonely road that he had to walk by himself. She folded the letter and put it away. His journey was no longer her concern. 3 months later, Amelia was in the newly opened office of the Artemisia Project. It was a bright, welcoming space, filled with determined women working to help others. She was on the phone with their first major client, a young woman trying to escape an abusive relationship with a powerful executive, offering her legal resources and a safe place to go. As she spoke, she felt a strong, definite kick from within her belly. She paused, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture that was no longer a performance for others, but a private, profound connection. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Her life wasn't a fairy tale anymore. It was better. It was real. It was a life built not on the fragile foundation of a man's approval, but on the bedrock of her own strength, her own purpose, her own truth. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that her son would be born into a world where his mother's legacy was one of courage. The story of the humiliated wife was over. The story of the woman who changed the world, starting with her own, had just begun. Amelia's journey from a gilded cage to a life of purpose is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest pain. She didn't just escape her abuser, she reclaimed her own story and used it to light the way for others. Her next move wasn't just shocking, it was revolutionary. It proves that one voice, speaking the truth, can be louder than all the money and power in the world. What do you think of Amelia's incredible transformation? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If her story of courage and resilience touched you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire and empower. Thank you for watching.